And it appears that we are recording. Hello, everybody. And it is Friday night, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. And you know what that means. It is time for TGI, the greatest indoor reading series, a series that has been going strong since March of 2020. It is hard to believe that both with the pandemic and with this show, we are closing in on a year. It's kind of remarkable in the sense of I feel like the past year has really shown us how slippery the perception of time actually is, because it's both a week and a million years at the same time. That's what it feels like. It feels like it may have been one 22-minute sitcom episode, or I might be 800 years old now. I'm not sure. At any rate, we're always happy to be here. We are here every Friday, with the exception of, I think, 2. We took 1 week off in the summer, and then also we didn't do one on Christmas because we figured no one would come. But other than that, this show was started by Trina Thibodeau, my partner here. She's behind my head. There she is. But she's also in her own window, as a way to keep in touch with creative people and as a sort of proxy or replacement for some of the community-based exercises that creative people like to do, like conferences, retreats, just hanging, whatever. And honestly, it's been wonderful because we've gotten to know people from places we probably wouldn't have known anyways. Zoom kind of erases some geographical boundaries for us. So yeah, as I said just before I hit record, usually it's the past, well, almost the past year, it feels like just about every week I have to talk about something difficult that's happened in the news. I don't think that's the case this week. I'm glad to see some consequences happening to certain individuals. There was a band that I was a fan of when I was a kid, and that the guitar player of that band, I believe, is about to be arrested by the FBI for showing up inside the Capitol building. And guess what? I won't be listening to them anymore. At any rate, we are here. We are ready to connect to one another. I am talking about Iced Earth, Cassie. Yes. And that actually is the last thing. And that's great. Thank you for saying that, Cassie, because you just reminded me the chat button on Zoom is a great place to participate in a discussion while you're all listening. If you want to chime in with lines you like, with reactions. I know the readers really appreciate it too. After they finish reading, they can go back and look through the chat and see what people responded to and things like that. That's very nice. So yeah, do that. And without any more hullabaloo from myself, everyone who's been here a few times knows that I really am trying to wean myself off use of the word ado. Patrick just got here, so that's perfect. We will get going. So our first reader tonight is Maxima Khan. She lives in the Sierra Nevada in California, where she writes poetry, essays, and occasionally fiction. Her debut full-length collection of poems, Fierce Aria, was released by Finishing Line Press in May 2020. Her poetry and essays have appeared in the Louisville Review, Wisconsin Review, Spillway, Tool Review, and Sweet, among many others. She has received fellowships and scholarships to the Vermont Studio Center and the Community of Writers, and was a finalist for the Atlanta Review Poetry Prize. Having taught at the University of California Davis Extension, she now teaches and blogs at brilliantplayground.com. You can find more out about her writing at maximacon.com and get insider access. And this is actually something I'd love to pick her brain about afterwards. Insider access to her creative process and new works at patreon.com/maximacon. Without any more, Maxima, you should be able to unmute and take it away.
Okay, thank you. This is such a delight to get to, I feel like a little party crasher coming in to this lovely party you all have created, and it's wonderful. So yeah, I'm going to read from Fierce Aria, which is my collection that came out this year, and here it is, Fierce Aria, with all my post-it notes hanging out of it. So I'm going to start with the first poem in the book, which is called Winter. All night the ravens release a black crying, as if they held worlds we can never touch. It's the woods where the breathing moves, where night, well, you know, At some point, you have to come back to your own house. All the spells of the others, you have to leave them. Even the apple the old witch gave. You're not going to wake up to salvation. You know that by now. But inside, where the cupboards are filled with the familiar, where loneliness languishes in narrow beds, here there is something you can build with. There isn't any choice about where to start, always the beginning, small and limited as it seems. One rose in a cup, the mouse gnawing the cereal, laundry muttering in a basket. After that, I can't say. The woods are dark. Here is the gate, and it seems my own amazement cries me to sleep. Thank you. So both my parents are or were philosophers. They were both philosophy professors. And this is a scarring thing for a child. I think the only thing worse is two psychologists. But so hence I grew up hating, loathing philosophy, never took a philosophy class, have never read a traditional philosophy book. But my poems are riddled with philosophy because I grew up constantly being asked to question the nature of reality and language and perception. So there it is. It's all over my poetry. So I'm going to read a particularly philosophical poem called Changing the Scene. Those who are following along, which is probably no one, it's on page 15. But the poem is sort of about the gap between our ideals and how we actually behave. Yeah, changing the scene. Because there's this gap, inevitable, between what we believe and what we do. Because we set our ideals among the branches, the high branches, while our feet keep tracing these circles on the ground, our feet of clay. And we believe so deeply, but there are circumstances, no? Both beyond and well within our control. And we would like so much to be good. And we would also like so much to be bad. We are obsessed with freedom, with choice, and this is where the unraveling begins, in that sway between reality and the inner singing. The ideals look so pretty, all dressed up in their white bows, their Sunday school clothes, but they are not what they seem. Then life, of course, is nothing like what it seems. We are in a state of perpetual bewilderment, and we are holding the two things, the ideals and the actual, swaying. One is like some incredibly tall and unsteady building you have to crane your neck to see up the side of, so you feel alternately nauseous and exhilarated. And the other is like some ocean, endless and dark, and we are stumbling around on the ocean floor, kicking up sand dollars and bumping into coral and whales, while we think we should be swimming, but in fact, we are those self-same ragged claws. Which is not to say the position we find ourselves in is so bad, though it's different from the view we thought we'd have from the top of that skyscraper, depending on how you position yourself. But my point is, you don't get to position yourself because the positioning happens of its own accord for you, as it were. So what we are doing is more like a continual repositioning in relation to something, we don't know what, that is continually moving the pieces, changing the scene. And the result, well, there is no end result, is some elaboration, not quite intended, with a kind of allure, with something, with a kind of allure and a kind of disappointment, with something sort of funny and something terribly sad and something that is a great relief. This elaboration, look at it closely, swaying, blue, isn't it more or less poetry? So I thought I would read my poem January Blues, which is my my bad mood poem. I was in a really, really bad mood when I wrote this poem. I was in a cafe in my little town. I live in a small town in Northern California in the mountains. And I was in a little cafe some years back, and it was pouring rain out and freezing cold. And we were all huddled there in the cafe, and a young guy was playing the fiddle inside the cafe. And I was in this foul mood and wrote this poem, January Blues. People are clinging to the rafters for a thread or shred of music, the banging against our bodies of anything bigger than we are. Rain sluices the cafe windows, cold and fucking wet, but a thin man plays the fiddle and our bones shudder for the life the dead cat sings. Everyone everywhere has lost their mind. So how do we continue post-apocalypse, as it were? I'm not willing to be polite. Even the baristas are pounding the cups in time. Carry me away with your blues then. The rain's not letting up anytime soon. So this, this next one's called The More You Break It, and it was inspired by a line in a Mark Doty poem. The line is, the more you break it, the nearer it comes to whole. And I was so kind of stopped and intrigued by that line, like, is that true? The more you break it, the nearer it comes to whole. And you know, what does that mean for us with all that we have to go through in our lives? So this poem came out of that, the more you break it. Is it true? What shatters us day after vanishing day is how we are being annealed into the fullness that we are. Our salt tears, like pieces of glass meant to catch the light, capture it, reflect some truth hidden in us we were blind to in our happiness. When the light was not fractured, when we didn't know we needed the very force, destroyer, ruthless, how it goes in a circle. And we can only approach when every fragment is fragmented, hammered, splintered, strewn, spent, when it lies glittering white sand on a beach. Not to make a prayer of suffering, but to find solace in the knowing that this destruction, these shards of the mirror, we can only come nearer when we come through the fire, burnished, reflective, so that we see ourselves as we are in this broken mirror, whole. All right, and I'll do one more. Making It Enough, this is called. And this poem, it has a quote in it from Rilke, the poet Rilke, near the end. It has a quote in German, Rühmen das ist, which means to praise, that's it. Or, you know, that's where it's at, essentially. Making it enough. Clatter of insects, whir of a little bird, urgency of the body, its unending thirst for pleasure. Tastes luscious on the tongue, textures that flatter the hand, rich aromas, lush harmonies, melodies that clutch your heart, dissonance that grips you to the edge you teeter on just before orgasm, electric guitars scream and throb, all this coming into being and dying, all this ecstasy and hurry and regret, all this need and questing and questioning, all this love burnishing everything. It is enough. The love of beauty, the love of love, words that melt and ooze when rolled in the cavity of the mouth, the eye that lingers over curves, patinas, luster, glow. It is enough. to praise, ruhen, das ist's, and praising to stand in a state of grace at one with the teeming world. Thanks for listening.
All right, Maxima, thank you so much. Really, I think a good selection of poems and topics for right now, particularly. In the one that you preambled with telling us that your parents were philosophy professors. I mean, it's interesting because I went to school to study philosophy because my dad was a scientist, form of rebellion. Um, but, but I can imagine, being introduced to these huge questions maybe a little too early, probably.
Much too early.
Yeah, but at the same time, the key question and the way you resolve it in that is really interesting, which is, how do we reconcile what we say our ideals are with all the things people are doing right now? And then, moving to January Blues, how do we reconcile the pain of existence and the tension that just exists in the air in this exact moment, in history and geography? How do we get through these things? And I think, your last poem there gave us a bit of an answer to some extent. I mean, I really strenuously rebel against things like gratitude lists and, and that sort of thing, or any kind of really what feels forced self-help, stop and smell the roses kind of things. But at the same time, it's like, it's all happening at once. So what do you want to look at, I guess, to some extent? What do you want to feel? What do you want to focus on? What do you want to turn towards as much as you can? Or just hold in your mind while you sort of stare out? And that last line, something about the world teeming around you, it is sort of embodies that chaos and overwhelming nature of reality. So I really appreciate it. I got a ton out of that, and I am definitely going to go check out this book. I wanted to ask too, Fierce Aria came out during the pandemic, is that right?
Yes, came out in May.
Okay, so how has that been for you? Has it been a lot of events like this, or?
Yes, I mean, of course, I'm entirely confined to Zoom, but it hasn't been as bad as I thought it would be. I mean, I had hoped, I had visions of taking these wonderful mini road trips and doing all these readings in bookstores, and I love road trips. So, I did have to deal with about a month of like a deep sort of disappointment and reset, right? And then once I geared up and I did a book launch on Zoom as the first event, and then just started looking for reading series like this. And the thing that I discovered that's been so wonderful is getting to meet poets and poetry lovers literally all over the world. That, I mean, living in a small town, I would not have had access to. So it's actually been really lovely. I think poetry has been the highlight of the pandemic for me, also in the fact that I can hear poetry every night of the week if I want online. I mean, it's just incredible that everything is accessible. It's the first time I've attended the Dodge Poetry Festival ever, is this year. So in that way, it's been great,
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think it has, and to some extent, it has given us a way to focus on those things that connect us to other people, rather than maybe things that I would just say the rest of the internet is more focused on tearing things apart. But
Right.
these Zoom poetry meetings seem to be about like
Yes.
coming together. So, anyways, I think Noli posted links to all of your sites and a place to get your book as well in the chat. So people head on over there if you'd like to read more of Maxima's work. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. Our next reader, I think arrived just after we started. So I just want to make sure, did he just disappear? And I think he just disappeared. Did Patrick's window just disappear? Okay, that's fine. I think we'll go around him and then we'll return if he's able to return. I saw him there for a few minutes. Noli's working on it. Anyways, this is, the interesting thing is we have been going long enough now where we have started to have technical difficulties, and that's kind of fun. We need a graphic though, where like it's a little cartoony version of me next to a broken computer that we can put up with like some nice jazz music or something. We'll work on it. Anyways, for now, I'm going to skip ahead just quickly to our next reader. I won't use ordinals. I think they're called second, third, etc. Our next reader is Erin Elizabeth Smith. She is the creative director at the Sundress Academy for the Arts and the managing editor of Sundress Publications. She's the author of 3 full-length collections of poetry, and her work has appeared in Guernica, Ecotone, Crab Orchard, and Mid-American. Smith is a distinguished lecturer in the English department at the University of Tennessee. So, Erin, you should be able to unmute and take us away.
Hey, thank you guys so much for having me. This is such a joy. Sundress has been doing online reading series for about 4 years now, so we felt a little ahead of the curve. And now I'm like, everybody's online. Yes, now I can go to everything. So it's wonderful. It's so great to see so many familiar faces, and it's a joy to be here at those. Thank you so much for the time and energy that I know goes into hosting these sorts of things. So really appreciate it. I too had a book come out during the pandemic. It's a special year. And I'm gonna read some sad poems for you. It's my brand. Yeah, but before actually we get into the sad, let's read a poem about food, because that's my one true love. Gastronomy. It starts with a little epigraph from Auden. Murder is commoner among cooks than members of any other profession. That first love in Oxford, one live oyster on a fisherman's boat, a child pallet of potatoes, string cheese turned. What a cook would kill for now, not just pepper and pig, but flamboyantly red marrow and Singapore stalls, Ecuadorian goat brain that sizzles in the cigarette dark streets. One whole cobra, blood, bile, its beating heart in white ramekin. We eat and we become something hungry. The kebabbed meat blackening on charcoal, the blown glass beauty of chocolate, the roasted spring of sweet onion in Spain's high sun destroys us forever. The 2 dry chickens of our mothers, their casseroles of frozen broccoli, turkey cutlet. Nothing left of us but the urge to consume something miraculous. Stained glass sushi windows, the perfect snowball truffle of fresh ricotta, all those edible flowers, nasturtium and zucchini blossom like butterflies in sheet pasta. If we kill, it is from desire. The porcelain fill of bowls with our soups, the want of something we can hold to our lips, in our mouths, and devour. So thanks. So a lot of this collection deals with my very short, very ill-advised marriage, and then it's dissipation. So the rest of those are going to kind of work within that context. So this is called, and so a lot. Also, the poem is. A lot of it deals with Alice in Wonderland. I was teaching a class on the real literature of Disney. And so I was doing a whole unit like on Alice and different retellings of Alice. And so I got really like deep into this, like right after my husband and I separated. And so like all of those sorts of like thematic elements and whatnot started like spinning up. And so a lot of these poems are kind of focused within that context of like the Alice universe. So. Remembering the name, or the 10-month marriage. The night he said he was leaving, I drank everything in the house. The freezer of vodka, 2 warm beers, brandy I used for brown mushroom sauces. I sat on the slatted wood of the deck and tried to chart backward with my sextant of a brimmed glass. I thought in names, in cold beds, in the strange alphabet of hindsight. When he said he didn't love me, the roof did not come off and roll around the room. but I wanted to knock every table over, to forget the way my name had sounded in his mouth, the way he'd pull the air in between his lips before he came, to look at his long body on that sofa and see a foreign thing, a stammering king made kitten in the shaking. Instead, the night changed nothing. The broken flower pot stayed split, the door still opened at my touch, and bottles empty, as bottles tend to do. Alice rewatches Garden State. What I know about moving on is nothing like how it really works. The movies never get it right. There's no groundswell of viola lighting a perfect pink ocean, no dainty park bench to come together to mourn, where he probably would have placed his hand on mine, as a parent would. No, in the movies, there are flights of splintered dishes, but no one sees the sweeping up, the shameful dustpan that weighs in a hand like defeat. The snotty tears that blotch the face are not kissed away. We are taught to believe if you run, someone will follow. If you swaddle your sobbing with shower curtain steam, someone will open a door. But in this world, there is no final rainy embrace. The doorknob you watch will never turn. No one gets off the plane. Alice gives advice to Dorothy. Never get in a man's hot air balloon. He'll only ferry you to the family who opened you to him before. There you were a child to be tamed, turned to aprons, dustbins, white pies cooling on a windowsill. He will take your hand and make you something his. Where in this land you are given a crown, jeweled walkway, a horse that flickers deliciously from one hued gemstone to the next. They will lose you again anyhow, thrown to the slippery sea that opens its maw to devour girls. What you left to straw men and clockworked hearts will have been changed, and they will blame the women. Lazy queens, mirrored heads of sorceresses, and you, so foolish to believe home is something you'd want to click your heels for. A place where we aren't just stories told to keep girls tight in their own beds. And I'll end with the last two poems in the book. Thank you again for having me. The Last Snow. The last snow pants in the milky dawn, unable to stay anywhere but afloat, while the daffodils have curled back to their fleshy bulbs. The rest of winter stuck on loop. Apricot blossoms, white as storm, shiver on their boughs. On each country drive, she waits to see the triage of redbud, the dainty dogwood littering bloom, hopes the hills blush a Paris green, but instead the lake is drained again, bluegills gasping on its ruddy shore. Even home is not a place for early ramps and spring peaches. There, her tiny wrists vibrate in the draft left by the thick quiet without birds. Alice doesn't know what this reminds her of, but she's old enough to understand the split grace of gray, how winter creeps back just when we believe in warmth again. One of the things that I realized in writing this book was, in putting this book finally together, was that so much of it was about divorce, was about loss, was about kind of reimagining what I thought marriage or relationships were, but ultimately I realized in its process it was also a love letter to Knoxville, which is where I live, and coming to learn more about the city that I ended up making my long-term home. So it ends with this little poem. February in Knoxville. The lawn finally goes brown with the dusting of leaves and turned earth. The stalks of daffodils invert and the purple husks of berries hang like baskets from their vines. February, and there's no more snow, just a showy wind making everything crackle. Still, the city blinks in blue and white, its people wrapped like crunchy gifts. I breathe into cupped palms, walk the streets that turn into others, and watch as the sun kicks light off our city's strange sphere. We cannot choose where we love. The place picks us from the flyaway denizens who root and seed, from the boxes that open and reseal with no hands to lift them. Sometimes we empty and are never filled. Sometimes the rosemary lasts through winter and mint comes back like a hero on her masted ship. And sometimes the sweetness of cities and seasons is enough to clean the body of its harm. And we must take what lives to the lips to see if maybe it can heal us again. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Erin. Wonderful work. And I love sort of where you landed, when thinking about the poem, Atlas Rewatches Garden State. I've somehow never seen that movie, but the thing is that I totally got that this idea that in film, in books, in all these sort of popular depictions of people's emotional lives, there's some scene where someone sits and they finally see a sunset or a sunrise or a nice flower or an attractive person smiles at them, and all of a sudden you just know they're going to be okay. But the thing that I thought immediately was, I've had moments like that, but the movie never shows the moment I have 20 minutes later where I'm back in the dark place in my car screaming at somebody who won't get into the next lane or something. And I think where you landed there is probably more, I don't want to say appropriate, but realistic. The ability to open ourselves a tiny bit to the idea of hope instead of, and now everything's going to be fine forever. And that's sort of, we have this tendency, I think, in a society that pressures us to be happy and to find the thing you're going to do forever and the way you're going to live, and then you're just going to do it over and over and over again. It's going to be perfect. We have this pressure we put on ourselves to find the moment where everything's going to be okay forever, and we don't do enough to nurture and recognize the reality that there is all this pain, and that what we need to do is just be able to be like, well, let's just open ourselves up to one thing, today or something like that. I think it's, so I really appreciate it. And I think, going through an experience, like a divorce, that's not something that I've had the misfortune of dealing with. And I can imagine, it's fertile ground for all those really nasty realities of life and those flip sides to all the sort of beauty. I loved in your work, though, there was this consistent sort of like consistent kind of onomatopoetic / alliterative thing that even while you were maybe talking about these difficult experiences or feelings, there was something sort of pulling me along through it that felt almost musical, I think. And that really sort of, sometimes with I think if you're dealing with really difficult emotions in a creative work, it's best to be brief, or you have to make sure that there's enough beauty in there to get people through to see the point. So I just wanted to say, I think you handled that really well. All right. So Noli, I believe, just posted a link to all your work in the chat. So if people would like to read more of Erin's work and find out more about what she does, maybe Noli has not posted it yet. She will shortly. Yeah, you should go over, if nothing else, you can go to Sundress Publications. So go check out more of Erin's work. Thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate it. All right. So I'm just going to check in, make sure, Patrick, it looks like you've resolved all technical difficulties.
For the time being, and
Okay.
I've got my fingers crossed. If I could use some more fingers crossed too.
We are nothing if not hopeful and flexible. So if anything does go, don't worry about it. And I'm going to make you the co-host so you can share your screen if need be.
Excellent.
Okay. Let's see. There you go. So, all right, now I'll give you a little introduction. So, our next reader is Patrick Madden. He is the author of 3 essay collections: Disparates 2020, Sublime Physic 2016, and Quotidiana 2010. And he's the co editor of After Montaigne 2015. He teaches at Brigham Young University and Vermont College of Fine Arts. With Joey Franklin, he edits the journal Fourth Genre, and with David Laser, he edits the 21st Century Essays series at the Ohio State University Press. He also curates the online essay resource quotidiana.org. So, Patrick, you should be all set. You can take us away.
Great. Well, first, thanks so much, Ridge, and thanks, Noli, for inviting me. I'm really grateful to participate tonight, even though it looked like it might not happen for a while. Thanks for your patience with me, everybody. And also, I'm really glad to be reading with Maxima and Erin and Catherine. It's been great so far, even though I must admit to scrambling a little bit during Erin's reading so I could try to get reconnected. But I loved what I heard. As Rich said, the latest book, you could call it Disparates or Disparates. The Spanish word disparates means nonsense or tomfoolery. And I appreciate how essays generally sometimes seem like they're not very important or they're focused on frivolous subjects, but maybe sometimes they're secretly important too. So I'm going to read 2 essays tonight from the book. The book includes some humorous essays and some borrowed form or hermit crab essays. So I'll read one of each, and I think they work in 2 different emotional registers. The first one is called Mea Culpa, and it is inspired by the James Fry Million Little Pieces fiasco of a decade or more ago, when he was discovered to have invented key parts of his memoir, A Million Little Pieces. And he was excoriated by Oprah and seems not to have suffered too much long term. But his publisher issued, he wrote, and they issued an apology statement. So I did likewise when I discovered, with the help of my wife and some other family members, that I too had fictionalized parts of my first book. So this is Mea Culpa. As the phone calls, the letters, the legal summonses mount, and the smoking gun journalists harass me, my family members, and my friends, I have decided to come clean, to declare my guilt preemptively before I am unmasked by those muckrakers with nothing better to do than to flush a fledgling writer's career down the toilet. I admit it. I fictionalized key parts of my supposedly nonfiction collection of personal essays, Quotidiana. As a long-time committed nonfictionist, one who teaches his students not to lie, to select and shape their real experiences into literature, I feel so ashamed. I sincerely apologize to those readers who have been disappointed in my actions. What's perhaps most disappointing, to me at least, is that it's been my wife, my father, my mother-in-law, and a good friend who've tattled on me. For instance, on page 31, I claimed that I only bought UB40's greatest hits when Karina and I were filling out our order for free CDs from the Columbia House. Karina now assures me that no, I actually bought this CD from a brick and mortar store as a gift for her. And on page 22, where I say that Karina gave our first son the nickname Pato, I know now that I should have credited Karina's mother instead. I can only imagine the anguish I have caused unsuspecting readers who have taken my word for these events. Later in the book, on page 101, I write, perhaps erroneously, that Helen sang alto harmony to my grandmother's soprano melody. Who knows why my father, who had read this particular essay in an earlier form, waited until the book was published to express his doubt about the veracity of this statement. Maybe, he told me, it was Helen who sang the soprano part, or maybe not. The truth is, right now, we really don't know. Perhaps the smoking gun investigators can tell me for sure. And on page 65, at the end of a long italicized list of Spanish names for fruits and vegetables for sale in Montevideo's Mercado Modelo, a section of the book that nobody actually reads, I briefly mentioned the Uruguayans' preferred word for pineapple, ananá, which I note in contrast to the more widely used piña. Although I have made no claim about the word's origin, my friend Eduardo Galeano, a wonderful Uruguayan writer, has nevertheless offered the following critique of my research. Quote, I like the book, but here's just a small observation. If I'm not mistaken, the word ananá is Guarani, Tupi Guarani to be exact, because the fruit comes from Brazil and was unknown outside of tropical America before the European conquest. End quote. I offer the correction or expansion here in the spirit of penance for my sin of omission. But I suspect there is no forgiveness for the greatest factual error I've yet encountered in the book. On page 126, just joking around, I quote some lyrics from a Rush song, replacing It's a Part of Us with hippopotamus. I attribute these lyrics correctly to Neil Peart, but place them in the song Entre Nous, which is blatantly false and an embarrassment to me. I claim to be such a staunch Rush fan, so how could I not know that these words are from Different Strings, the song after Entre Nous on 1980's groundbreaking Permanent Waves? To this humiliating question, I have no sufficient answer, only excruciating guilt and sorrow. I regret my decisions to falsify my experience in these and perhaps yet other undiscovered ways, or my slothfulness in neglecting to check these vital facts of my life. I recognize that I have discredited myself in irreparable ways. I only hope that these revelations will not alter my readers' faith in the book's central message, whatever that may be. Thankfully, my publisher has assured me that it will take all steps necessary to put things right with the defrauded public. Taking a page from Doubleday's playbook, it's issued the following statement. This is a quote. The potential for controversy over Patrick Madden's Quotidiana will possibly in the future cause serious or perhaps only mild concern at the University of Nebraska Press. It is not the policy, neither is it the stance of this or any other company that we might or might not know of, that it doesn't matter whether a book sold or lent from libraries as nonfiction isn't false, or that it might not be misconstrued as having arisen from certain unverities or misfacts. Readers wishing to receive a refund on their purchase should simply cut out the kookaburra from the book's jacket, paste it on a popsicle stick, and create a YouTube video of the animated bird chanting a page from Quotidiana, making sure to change voices for and properly cite any block-quoted passages. Send your link to refund@quotidiana.org along with your contact information. The best rendition, as voted on by a panel of expert judges, will receive a check for 1/10 of the book's current lowest Amazon Marketplace price. We try to bear a certain responsibility for some of what we publish when we can, and we apologize to the reading public for any unintentional confusion, bewilderment, or mystification surrounding or concerning the publication of Quotidiana or any other books ever. End quote. Thank you. I'll try and read this other short essay. I said some of the essays in the book are in borrowed forms. This one comes in the form of a word search puzzle. It's called Repast. I promised a different emotional register. The subject matter is about my mother's funeral and following. So at the repast, things were allowed to be jovial once more. Too much solemnity already that, oh, all the words are in the puzzles, if you want to try and look for them. Yeah. Too much solemnity already that day. Still, there came a moment when I was expected to speak in memory of my mother. I had dreaded this. I noted my friends' and family's likely expectations for the writer's extemporaneous eulogy, and I made a perfunctory attempt to speak, but ultimately I simply couldn't find the words. The word repast shares a Latin root with pasta, antipasto, pasture, and thus refers simply to the act of eating generally. A repast is a feast, not necessarily after a funeral. But etymologies being what they are, forensic rememberings, tracings through time, who can miss the internal redundancy of repast, a past once again, a miraculous return to/of what once was. Although she was often anxiously engaged in many good causes, my mother still found leisure time to read or, in later years, do the crossword, calculate Sudoku, find words amidst the jumble. Harmless, indolent mental entertainments, wastes of time. Left behind in the alcove she shared with my father atop her desk, we find a yellow and yellowing ultimate word search decorated with her handwritten notes. From his indolence, Borges imagined a library that includes all verbal structures, all variations permitted by the 25 orthographical symbols. Such a system would contain, amidst leagues of senseless cacophonies, all that it is given to express in all languages. Imagine the hidden treasures of wisdom, everything ever known or unknown, every stray thought, even our very selves translated into dormant words awaiting discovery. If, as Borges promises, when writers die, they become books, then perhaps even my mother, who never wrote more than notes, may yet be recovered in my books, or perhaps discerned and remembered, reconstituted textually from the vast gallimaufry of words, both intended and accidental. And thus I may repass our lives together and find her again in the paradisiacal library. My solitude is gladdened by this elegant hope. Thank you.
Wow, Patrick, thank you so much. Two very different sort of looks at form and expression, but at the same time, in the same way, I like that both of them had this sort of playful, like, let's take a, like in the case of the mea culpa, the somewhat stilted corporate apology has become a very like its own specific form in and of itself. And then, in the case of putting these words in a word search, because I guess, well, let me go with the mea culpa first. It hadn't occurred to me, but obviously, nobody writes a true nonfiction book because it's based on your memories and it's based on maybe the memories of people you talk to who were there. And then beyond that, I assume, at least when you reach the level of publication, there might be like lawyers who say like, hey, we probably shouldn't put that guy's name in there.
Yeah.
So just the idea of sort of re-examining that, and like the idea of if we had to be as careful in storytelling as anyone who gets caught in a really maybe a more insidious deceit is kind of a funny way to view ourselves. And I don't know what it was, but there was something about the specifics of redeeming their refund and all of that just really tickled me. I did want to ask, is that an actual website you've set up or email you've set up to Tidiana?
For a while, I monitored the email and nobody ever sent dancing kookaburra singing a page from the book. I was a little sad about that. But people did send brief notes like, does this really work, kind of thing. And I haven't checked it for years now. So I can't say. Maybe there's something sitting there waiting for the 1/10 refund. I should check.
If nothing else, for our, whatever reach we possess as an organization and reading series, that is our call to action this week, is to cut out the kookaburra. And no, that's it. It's such a good sort of satirization of the whole process of, I'm going to give you the exact thing we did wrong, and we're going to pay lip service to the fact that we did it wrong, and we will portray ourselves as contrite. And if you would like anything in return for our error, we're going to make it as hard as possible, and it's not going to be worth it. That's like the perfect summation. And then the second, not only just, fascinating in terms of form, but dealing with, a significant loss in life, and trying to put that into words and trying to think something coherent of it. I mean, what's fascinating about it was that the movement of my eyes around the word search looking for something, I could feel in that moment that is the same movement I have done while trying to speak about something that difficult. that there is this real literal sort of like searching, gaze that goes on as we're trying to put something into words. And I loved that the pages, it felt at least that the pages, while they were contiguous, there were jumps where it's sort of like on this one you're thinking about this, and on this one you're thinking about this. And I guess I'm curious, I mean, you mentioned that, I assume that that's real, that you found, word puzzle book when your mother passed away. What was there something that gave you that idea? Was there like a moment where you thought this is the best way to express how this feels?
Yes, but not, it came about backwards though.
Hmm.
Thanks, by the way, for your thinking about the essay. I hadn't really considered the movement of the eye, the reader's eye movements, and casting about for words to say. But I agree, and I really like and appreciate that observation. It actually happened because I really enjoyed an essay in the anthology, The Shell Game, edited by Kim Adrian.
Hmm.
There's an essay that's in the form of a crossword puzzle by Laurie Easter. I think it's called Solving to Grandma. I may have the title wrong, but it's certainly Laurie Easter. And I found online an online crossword puzzle maker website, and I thought I would try to write a crossword puzzle essay myself. I found that to be extremely difficult, but the same website could also make word search puzzles. And the word search puzzle's a little bit simpler because it fills in space with jumbled letters. And the timing was such that as I was getting here, we had just had the repast and funeral, and we were, all at my parents' home, my siblings, our families, everybody was there. And there was this word search puzzle book. There were other Sudoku books and all sorts of things that my mother used to do. It kind of all just fell into place and clicked. And I wrote one, and then Borges showed up because I remembered the Library of Babel, and I thought, this has a resonance with that. And so it just fell into place pretty well, luckily for me.
Yeah, I mean, it does really, it works really well. And just, it's one of those times where I was really grateful that I could have you reading while I looked at the pages as well, because I do, I think it would be a different experience if you were to, have to sort of do both on your own, going back and forth. And it's always really interesting because I know, people like to post these like word jumble things and memes and things that is like the first 3 words you say this year is what you're going to experience or whatever. But it was interesting which words I sort of came across and how some of them were arranged, which I assume was relatively random. So anyway, thank you so much. So if people want more information, there's quotidiana.org. And then there's also a link that Noli's going to post to the University of Nebraska Press with a discount code, it looks like. So people jump on that. Patrick, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Rich.
All right. Our final reader tonight is Catherine Pierce. She is the author of 4 books of poems, most recently Danger Days, published by Saturnalia Books in October. Her other books are The Tornado is the World, The Girls of Peculiar, and Famous Last Words. Pierce's work has appeared in The Best American Poetry, The New York Times, American Poetry Review, The Nation, The Southern Review, and elsewhere. An NEA Fellow and a 2-time Pushcart Prize winner, she is a professor of English at Mississippi State University, where she co-directs their writing program. Catherine, you should be able to unmute and close us out here.
Hey, everybody. Can y'all hear me okay? All right, great. Yeah, thank you so much to everybody, to Noli for inviting me to be part of this, and to Ridge and Trina for all your work with this series. It's such a great series. I'm so happy to know about it now. It seems like just a really wonderful community. So thank you all for inviting me here tonight. And also it was such a delight to read with the other readers tonight, Maxima and Erin and Patrick. I really enjoyed hearing all of your work, and you also all read it really well. Like, you're all really good readers, which I think is worth saying, right? Because sometimes you go to these things and like the work might be good, but the reading like isn't that good, and you really want it to be. So that was great. So thank you all. And thanks everybody for being here. It's Friday night, you know. It's a Friday night in a pandemic. What are we going to be doing? So I'm glad that you're here. I'm going to read a few poems from this book that Ridge mentioned. It's called Danger Days. It also came out in 2020, quite a year to release a book. But this one came out in October from Saturnalia Books. And I'm going to read a few poems from it. So this poem that I'm going to read now, I was thinking when I was writing this about, I had found a shoebox of old photographs, and I had found you know, pictures of people. You know, you take your film to the drugstore and then you'd wait a week or two and you'd get it back and you didn't know what you were going to find, right? And it was always really kind of exciting. Like, what were these pictures going to be of? And there'd be those kind of accidental photos in there sometimes that at the time you were kind of annoyed by, but now are such treasures because they were actual candid photographs, right? And we don't get those anymore so much because now we have smartphones and we can delete things right away and we can make sure we're getting the right kind of photo all the time. So this is a poem about that. It's called Here in the Future, We Are Always Watching Ourselves. Once we walked next to a river full of yellow perch and factory runoff and knew we were there. We didn't consider backdrop or backlighting. We walked. We fretted about carcinogens. We imagined being 30, moving to Belgium. Overhead, a tree frog made its ridiculous small sound, and maybe we laughed, or maybe we welled up for a second, the futility of that noise against the river's steady pulse, but we heard it. Once someone took a picture of us before we were ready, standing by a lake, a dogwood, a field of sunflowers, and it was 2 weeks until we got that film developed. And then there we were, off guard in front of some beautiful thing, sharp, skinny, or round with youth, hands outspread in a strange, almost egret angle, hair hanging to our waist maybe, or buzzed close like we did that summer, open-mouthed, as if we were saying something, which we almost certainly were. Now we're never saying something in the photos. How powerful we are now, how careful. The construction of a world requires diligence. Is that tulip tree the best tulip tree? Is that moon the best moon? Do our crow's feet show? And if so, is it in the most self-assured way? What about the sky behind us? Is it red enough for revelation? Are the streaks coming through? Is that mountain significant enough? We've seen others like it. These dandelions are furred and lovely in the afternoon sun, but our hands look old. Try again. When did our skin start to gather like that? When did the moon get so flawed? Look at that photo by the lake, the tree, the field. We were there once, and our hands, our strange hands, were so perfect. Thank you. This next poem is, so I have two sons. And when I was pregnant with both of them, I was obsessed with reading those charts that come out like, today your baby is the size of a grapefruit, or your baby is the size of a blueberry, or whatever, always like fruit or maybe vegetable comparisons, right? And they get increasingly strange as the pregnancy progresses, like your baby is the size of a leek, or your baby is, and you're thinking like, what does that mean? Like, they're really long and skinny. Like, how is my baby that size, right? Or I remember when I was like 9 months pregnant and it said, your baby is the size of an 8-pound pumpkin. And my husband said, couldn't they just say at that point, your baby is the size of a baby? Like, couldn't we just say that now? So anyway, so this is a poem that that kind of spins that premise out a little bit. It's called Gestational Size Equivalency Chart. Your baby is the size of a sweet pea. Your baby is the size of a cherry. Your baby is the size of a single red leaf in early September. Your baby is the size of what if, the size of please, Lord, the size of a young lynx stretching, heat lightning, a lava lamp. Your baby is the size of every dream you've ever had about being on stage and not knowing your lines. Your baby is the size of a can of Miller Lite. Apple picking, Google, all of Google. Your baby is also the size of a Google and also the size of the iridescence at a hummingbird's throat. Your baby is the size of a bulletproof nap mat. Cassiopeia on a cold night. The size of the 1.5 degree rise in ocean temps between 1901 and 2015. Your baby is the size of the lie you told your mother the night before senior skip day, and also the size of the first time you saw a whale shark glide by, its gray heft filling the tank's window, and also the size of just the very best acorn. Your baby is the size of the Mona Lisa, the size of the Louvre, the size of that moment in Levon when the strings first kick in. Your baby is the size of a baby-sized pumpkin, a bright hibiscus, a door. Your baby is the size of the gravitron, and your fear the first time you wrote it, that your heart might drop right through your body, and then your elation when it didn't, when the red vinyl panels rose and fell, and you rose and fell with them. That's a little shout out for anybody else who also loves the gravitron. Y'all know what that is? It's the spaceship ride that kind of sucks you up against the wall with centrifugal force. I used to ride that ride all the time when I was a kid, and then I stopped riding it. And then my son, who was 8 at the time, pressured me into riding it again. And I was absolutely terrified because, like, I don't know what my body is going to do on that as like a grown-up person as opposed to like a 10-year-old. But it was still really great, actually. So I recommend, if you liked it once, you'll probably still like it. All right, I'm gonna read 2 more. This one, it's funny, I was planning to read this and then Maxima read her poem that sort of had the question of, is this enough? You know, what is enough? And so this is a poem that's called Enough, and it also kind of takes on a similar question. It also references amusement park rides, because apparently that's a thing that I spend a lot of time thinking about. So this is called Enough. I got here through no talent of my own. I did not birth myself or even will myself into being. One day I was a cluster of cells. One day I was a heart. One day I was a human in the world. Now what? Look at the luck I was given, born into a place with a hot yellow sun, born with 2 nimble hands, a strong enough voice. If I'm not shouting down cruelty, or at least singing all the time, what am I doing? If I'm not building a table or holding a child or slicing tomatoes warm from the garden I've weeded myself, what am I doing? I bought these electric blue flats, suede. I did it because it made me feel a little happy, that small dopamine hit that comes from picturing yourself looking like someone wants to look at. But how absurd is that? How flimsy. I've never learned to change a tire. My music theory is abysmal. Sometimes I don't realize it's snowing until there's already a dusting on the driveway, which is certainly close to excuseless. But I swear I'm mainly paying attention. I swear I'm grateful at least a dozen times a day. If I could cradle the earth in my hands for 10 seconds, I would, just to show it how tenderly I could hold it, how I wouldn't drop it, how I cherish it, even as I'm turning in early instead of going out to see the Perseids. I've always loved a carnival. Is it enough to love a carnival? I could ride the teacups all day. That shriek that comes from spinning, the one that unfurls from somewhere deep below the throat like a bright streamer. It's language. It translates into thank you. Thank you. And I'll read just one more. This is the last poem in the book. And one of the things I wanted to do in writing these poems was think about our planet as a planet, right? To kind of think of it as not only as this place where we live and we kind of go about our day-to-day business, but also to kind of step back, like pan the camera way back and be aware of this planet that we live on. And so this poem is called Planet. This morning, this planet is covered by winds and blue. This morning, this planet is lit with dustless, perfect light. enough that I can see 1,000,000 sharp leaves from where I stand. I walk on this planet. It's hard-packed dirt and prickling grass, and I don't fall off. I come down light if I choose, heavy if I choose. I never float away. Sometimes I want to be weightless on this planet, and so I wade into a brown river or dive through a wave and for a while feel nothing under my feet. Sometimes I want to hear what it was like before the air, and so I duck under the water and listen to the muted hums. I'm ashamed to say that most days I forget this planet. That most days I think about dentist appointments and plagiarists and the various ways I can try to protect my body from itself. That last weekend, I saw Jupiter through a giant telescope, its storm stripes, 4 of its 67 moons, and was filled with fierce longing, bitter that instead of Ganymede or Europa, I had only one moon floating in my sky, the moon called Moon, its face familiar and stale. But this morning I stepped outside and the wind nearly knocked me down. This morning I stepped outside and the blue nearly crushed me. This morning, this planet is so loud with itself, its winds, its insects, its grackles and mourning doves, that I can hardly hear my own lamentations. This planet, all its grooved bark, all its sand of quartz and bones and volcanic glass, all its creeping thistle lacing the yards with spiny purple. I'm trying to come down light today. I'm trying to see this place, even as I'm walking through it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Catherine. Those were, again, as with all the readers tonight, such a wonderful selection of really, it sort of feels reductive to call it this, but relatable things in the sense of these sort of universal experiences, or what seem like universal experiences. Could just be within a certain culture, but these experiences that we have of the first about back when photos weren't posed. Oh, amazing. Because I have this is not like a braggy thing. This is a rule I've had to put into place to make myself more of a human being, is I have a thing where, like, when I'm at a concert, I don't take my phone out. Like,
Yeah.
I just won't, because I already, I'm fairly tall, so I'll stand towards the back or whatever, but I already probably have to watch a half the show through somebody's phone screen as they hold it up above their head. And I see this everywhere. This is, it's almost like a terrible stand-up comedy joke that people go on vacation and then they come back and they show you their pictures and it's 10,000 pictures of their face with slightly different backgrounds. Like, it's really grim. And those, older pictures where people are in the middle of cutting a cake or, I don't know, playing or whatever, those sort of these things. And, as at least for myself, as my father's gotten older and he started to occasionally just show up with a bag of CVS, those envelopes full of prints. It is really a different quality. And I think actually it ties in perfectly with the last one, which is how do you both be yourself and the observer at the same time, while sort of like, how do you let go of the observer part when it's necessary, and how do you grab onto it when it's necessary to kind of get yourself through something, because you might need a little more objectivity. And I think that's just like a really difficult question that it sort of feels like everyone addressed tonight in a strange way. We end up with accidental themes here on TGI. I don't know about, Noli might do a huge amount of research on you guys. I'm not sure. I look at the bios at like 7:25, and then I have to figure out if I need to ask anyone about pronunciation. That's my role. But we end up with these themes, and I think a lot of it is that everyone who's creating is doing some amount of introspection, and that introspection is asking some pretty essential questions, I guess. I don't like to pretend that we all think the same things, or we all believe the same things, or are worried about the same things, but there are a few. And actually your sort of poem about the where you happen to end up being born is kind of part of that too, is, you know, we have free will, but it's very much limited by the arbitrary nature of our circumstances. You know, this is who you are born to, where you are born, what that person's life is like, what they believe. These all sort of actually determine a huge amount of what's going to happen to you. So I think these are just really interesting. It's both overwhelming and freeing to think about, and then to think about, okay, we know this. What do we do now? How do we make sure we have a good life? How do we make sure we connect to people? How do we make sure is it riding the Gravitron? For me, no, because I would barf.
Maybe not then, maybe not for everyone. No.
That one's not for me. There's lots I can do that's great, but just the Gravitron does not happen to be one of them. At any rate, thank you so much. And so that collection just came out last year. You know, as we've said, kind of with everybody, you know, running into this difficulty of releasing a book. I was wondering, were any of those poems written during 2020, or was it sort of ready already and then the editing process and publication process took a long time?
Yeah, they weren't written. None of the poems in here, I don't think, were written during 2020. You know, they were all written in the last 4 years. I mean, so certainly they're all sort of 2016 and on poems. So they have a certain thematic ways that they're linked. But no, I don't think anything was written in this collection in 2020. I'm revising.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, because obviously it's more than just finishing the first draft of something that makes it publishable.
Sure.
Super obvious statement, but also, you know, it's good. I guess I just asked because I think it is going to be interesting what the experience of living through this pandemic and the added stressors that have sort of come about, maybe because of the pandemic. It's hard to tell why people are so agitated at the moment.
You pick, there are so many possible.
Yeah, exactly. One of about 400 possible reasons. But yeah, it'll be interesting, I guess, to see where people's work goes from here. But at any rate, I think, if nothing else, everyone who read tonight has something that already is beneficial to us, having gone through this. So, Catherine, thank you so much for closing us out in such a perfect way. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. All right. So that'll bring us to a close for tonight. Thank you all so much for being here. Thanks to anyone watching this down the line, as we did record it. And let's see, important business. Number one, if you want more information about the show or upcoming people who are going to read, you can go over to tgicast.com. Excuse me, I had snot. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can do that at TGIcast. That'll keep you apprised of both upcoming guests and any sort of releases that we do, but we also like to retweet people who have things going on. So it's fun to try to make it as communal as possible. And if you want to follow me on Twitter for some reason, I am at Ridge Cresswell, just my name, 2 S's, 2 L's. The show's creator, spiritual foundation, and recently nicknamed Diabolical Kiwi, Trina Thibodeau, is on Twitter at Trina Tibbs, TREENA THIBS, and the show's scheduler, booker extraordinaire, who is the person to contact if you have a friend, colleague, associate that you think you would like to hear on the show, is Noli Reed, who can be found on Twitter at that, and we'll also make her email address available if anyone wants to recommend somebody. We've gone from March of last year till now. I think we're coming up on, with 4 or 5 presenters or readers a week. We've had a couple visual artists as well. And I think we're coming up on 200 people that we've had on the show now. And all of that has happened because friend of a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend. All of that has happened, as I always say, in the actual sense of social networking, not in the sense of people pretending they live a fabulous life while trying to sell you things. Social networking. So please, send your friends along. This entire thing is fueled by connections and, positive recommendations, because nobody's steered us wrong yet. All right. With that, I think I'm just about done. I've been talking a bunch just now, and my mind is racing, and I didn't really eat dinner. But we will keep the room open for about an hour at least after the show. That's the show before and after the show is, of course, a big part of the show. So feel free to hang out if anyone wants to ask the writers questions, if anyone wants to, just speak to each other in general. Hang. I thought there was another word and then there was just nothing. That was amazing. All right. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to hit stop and we will see you next week.